Okay, in this video, I'm talking about the UFC's biggest competition, the UFC Killer, the roster that is on par with the UFC. They say that they're putting out a product that is just as good, if not better than the UFC. However, I literally cannot put its name in the title or show its logo in the thumbnail because this video will get literally 0 clicks. I am talking about the PFL, and I'm going to show you guys some evidence to point to why the PFL pay-per-view this weekend absolutely bombed, why nobody watched it, nobody was talking about it, and how much trouble the PFL is actually in, because this was meant to be the PFL's big coming out event. They had bought Bellator. Francis Ngannou was in the front row. John Jones was in the front row. We are going to look at some things in this video and talk about some things in this video that might paint a picture of just how bad a situation the PFL is in. They had everything going for them on the weekend. They had everything going for them on the weekend, and nobody cared about it. Now, sorry if that title was a little bit clickbaity, but I do feel like it is relevant, okay? Because the PFL did a big media tour middle of last year and towards the end of last year when they acquired Bellator, took over Bellator, and was saying that their roster is now just as good as the UFC's. Their roster stands up next to the UFC's. The PFL has been investing a bunch of money in regions all over the world. Plus, they've got a huge amount of money from the Saudis, the people that seem to have just bought out boxing entirely. They have pumped a bunch of money into PFL, and they have now got everything set up the way that it should be going. So they announced this supercard between Bellator and the PFL. And I'm awake. I'm like, all right, I'll give it a shot. Prelims are live on YouTube. I click on it to see how it's going, and it's bad. It's really bad. And it takes me down this rabbit hole of the PFL's YouTube channel, and I just start noticing things. And I think I'm going to share some of them with you. So the reason I explained what was going on last year and the lead up to the PFL this year was to try and show the sort of hype that the PFL is growing, the sort of hype that they are, marketing themselves as, what they're trying to sell the product as to the audience. And then you can sort of get a feel of how the audience is going to be receiving it when you look at social media numbers. Now, I know there's some people out there that talk about the social media numbers and say that they don't transition over into pay-per-views, and that is true. But if people aren't interested in a certain topic for free, they are not going to be forking out $50 to $80 for the pay-per-view, right? Whoever's buying the pay-per-view is going to be a small percentage of the people who are interested in the topic for free, or even interested in looking at the topic and talking about the topic on Twitter. So when you got the absolutely free product of just the prelims, what would you reckon the prelims were getting for free on YouTube? How many views do you think they were getting? When I clicked on it, they were getting about 6,000 views. 6,000 views. I am sure there are people out there in the MMA community that know live streams. Live streams of people just doing this, looking at a camera and talking to it, that can pull more than 6,000 views. And on the prelims, Clarissa Shields was fighting, a famous boxer that is transitioning over to MMA, and the prelims were getting 6,000 views. So I went and clicked on the PFL's YouTube channel, and they were releasing weekly fight vlogs, the same as UFC releases embedded, right? They were releasing these fight vlogs leading up to their event. The numbers that they were pulling were actually abysmal. I am actually scared for the PFL because of how low these numbers were. Now that I've gone back and checked before uploading this video, they seem to be pulling about 6,000 views each now that that's done. But going into it, right when the pay-per-view was about to start, I'm talking like 3,000, 4,000 views. 3,000 or 4,000 views on every single one of those videos of their fight week, people following it. The PFL has no fans. It just has absolutely no fans. Nobody was interested going into this PFL Bellator event. And then as the event unfolded, I'm online, I'm watching it, I'm on Twitter, and I'm looking at the Twitter numbers on the side. I think I'll just take a quick screenshot of how many impressions this is getting in the trending section. And I think it reached at max like 15,000 impressions, like 15,000 people talking about the topic. The UFC got 50,000. Look at any UFC video on YouTube, and we're talking 500,000 clicks per video. And the PFL is genuinely struggling to hit 10,000 clicks. If they get 10,000 clicks on a video, they've posted a really, really good video for the PFL. It is a massive problem for the PFL. They are so far behind the UFC. They are so far behind the UFC. It is crazy. And this should have been their night of nights. And then to go on with it further, like how the night actually played out. The PFL has been around since it was called World Championship of Fighting, or whatever it exactly was called. Honestly, by the looks of these numbers, who cares what it was called? But they've been around for a hot minute. I think they became the PFL in 2017. They acquired a dying roster over at Bellator. Why would Bellator be building talent if they have been looking for someone to buy it? And you don't just decide you're going to sell your company overnight. These decisions are made a year, 2 years in advance. So the Bellator roster has been stagnating for quite a while. And PFL has been actively trying to build up their roster. And throughout the night of their pay-per-view, they got smashed by Bellator. They bought a worse company with less fans than them, put on a pay-per-view that nobody watched because nobody was interested going into it. You can tell that by their vlog numbers, and pretty much lost the entire night. So their roster going into the acquisition of Bellator now looks even worse than it did before that. So you've got this horrible roster that nobody is watching, and the best fighters on your roster are aging out fighters that previously fought in the UFC, held up by all this Saudi money that's going on. And this is the really scary thing for the PFL. This is as good as it can possibly get for them. As good as it can possibly get for them. They just bought Bellator. They've got Francis Ngannou. They signed a deal with Jake Paul. They put on a massive pay-per-view. It's as good as it can get. If they are not making money now, the only thing that is propping them up is the Saudi money. And if the Saudis ever get bored, or if any wars happen in the future and there's any financial sanctions where that money can't be transferred, or if they simply just, like I said, lose interest and find a new toy to play with, if they get sick of throwing money at this operation, what person, what business, what entity, like Warner Brothers, Disney, Amazon Prime that's done a deal with One Championship, what business would want to invest in the PFL if they cannot make money now when they've got everything going for them and essentially have unlimited cash to try and sell this product to the world? If they do not turn a profit this year or next year, the moment the Saudis get bored, the PFL, that company is over. It is done. They have got nobody watching them and nobody cares. The PFL really need to sit down and look at the product that they're giving us as fans. And by the product, I mean, they're giving us the PFL pay-per-view tournament. Then they're giving us the PFL regular season. Then they're giving us these PFL tournaments all over the world in different regions. And then they're giving us Bellator. They've got all this watered down crap that nobody is interested in, going alongside a PFL season that has a watered down rule set of MMA. It's just not working. It's not landing. There is too much going on. They need to really rethink their business model going forward. Literally the only thing holding them up is the Saudis. And once they're done, the PFL is done. Their entire model is horrible. And this is meant to be the UFC's biggest competition. This is meant to be the thing that's going to go head to head with the UFC. It's got no chance at this point. There was not enough highlights and not enough interest to get people to want to watch the next PFL pay-per-view. That sucks for them. That really, really does. They're not moving forward. And furthermore, when you go to the PFL's YouTube channel and you click on the most popular videos, they are all Justin Gaethje, a UFC superstar, and a face-off between John Jones and Francis Ngannou. Their entire product is propped up by the fact that some famous UFC fighters have gotten in front of their cameras and the Saudis are paying for it all. That is the PFL. It is an empty, empty shell. And the last thing that I wanted to touch on with this is I was catching up and listening to Luke Thomas's podcast yesterday, and he talked about how this is the UFC's fault, how it's the UFC's fault for creating a monopoly. I'm sorry, mate, but I don't know if he actually knows what a monopoly is. Like, there are other businesses that are allowed to go ahead and compete with the UFC. And the PFL is a perfect example of that. The UFC does not control the MMA market. The PFL have come in with Saudi money, set up their own league, their own divisions, their own system all over the world against the UFC. The UFC hasn't tried to stop them from doing that. They're allowed to do that, and they're failing miserably. The UFC is controlling the market because the UFC is simply putting on a better product. It's like when Netflix came out against Blockbuster, and it's so funny that the PFL brought this reference up. I just remembered that. They brought up this reference of Netflix versus Blockbuster, but they are not giving us a superior product. They are giving us watered down crap, and no one's interested in buying it. This is like Apple versus BlackBerry. Like back in the day when smartphones were first coming out, I don't know, like I'm probably aging myself here, but BlackBerry brought out this supercomputer phone that had buttons on it, and iPhone brought out this flat screen. Guess which one won? The UFC is not being monopolistic here, if I can use the phrase. The UFC has allowed the PFL to come up, to poach some of its fighters, to create its own product, to put on its own pay-per-view at a different time to UFC Mexico. They went head-to-head. That was just a UFC fight night. That was just a UFC fight night in Mexico. This was the PFL versus Bellator, a pay-per-view to kick off the new year. This, like, they made a new belt. You could put a ring in it. It was like the Power Rangers or something. It was all too much. But they put on this premiere event against a UFC fight night, and they got absolutely flatlined. It's embarrassing. It's embarrassing for the PFL. They're stuffed. They are stuffed. Once the Saudis are done, they're done. No one is going to invest more money into that because this is as good as it should have been. And if it doesn't generate a profit, and there's no way that it did, there is no way that it generated a profit. You know, you look at the UFC, when they put on an event, it's a very clean, simple event. The walkouts are simple. All the uniforms are simple. The broadcast is done in this very simple, clean, and efficient way that is highly repeatable. You look at the PFL's event, they got a stage, they got Mike Tyson, they got celebrities, they got fireworks, they got all these gimmicks going on, and all these gimmicks they need to be paid for. The UFC have figured out a way to create a repeatable product, package it, and resell it across the world and do it the exact same way. And it's by repetitivity and by creating this factory process of putting out this product that you can keep costs down and generate a profit. That is the thing that no one seems to be understanding here. The trick to the UFC is they have found a way to sell us, the fans, fights and turn a profit on it. And the PFL have just thrown money at the wall and hoping that the shit sticks to it, and it's not. It is embarrassing. Again, it's embarrassing for them. I'm like, I can't believe how badly it's going for the PFL. If they do not turn this ship around, once the Saudis get bored, it's done. Anyway, that's what I saw coming through the weekend. And the biggest that's what I saw coming through from the weekend from the UFC's new biggest competitor. Nothing. And furthermore, when you go onto their YouTube page, the most viewed video that they have from the entire weekend, some post-fight interviews on their YouTube page have less than 1,000 views. Less than 1,000 views on a post-fight interview. It's so sad to see. There is a real chance that on this video, on this nobody's channel, right? This channel's got no subscribers, but I've got videos that have got more views than the PFL. It's insane. It's actually insane to think about. The biggest thing that came out of the weekend was the PFL interviewing Jon Jones, begging to do a cross-promotion fight. And Dana is 100% right. Why would the UFC lower itself to that level? Why would they bother? The whole event seemed to be built around begging Jon Jones and begging Dana White to do a cross-promotion fight. So sad, man. So sad. If you're looking for some real competition to the UFC and you want to watch something fun and different, go watch One Championship. One Championship is a way better product. It's way more fun to watch. It actually, like the way that they are Muay Thai based rather than wrestling based, and their entire rule set leads to more fun fights than the UFC. Go support ONE FC. If you want competition in the MMA world, ONE FC is bleeding money. Go watch One Championship. It's so good to watch. They're my thoughts from what I saw over the weekend. Let me know, apart from the UFC, are there any other MMA organizations that you watch that aren't on Fight Pass? Because everything that's on Fight Pass is sort of set up to be a feeder organization for the UFC. So let me know, are there any other organizations out there that you watch? Put it down there in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to hit that subscribe button. And of course, I'll see you all in the next one.